built it with my own hands, every plank, every screw, every tiny detail, down to the miniature mailbox, painted sky blue with the name Captain Treebeard's HQ in crayon letters. It wasn't just a treehouse, it was a castle, a spaceship, a pirate fort, a sanctuary for an 8-year-old boy with more courage in his pinky toe than most grown men I know. My nephew Max had been diagnosed with leukemia 6 months earlier. He'd lost his hair, but not his spirit. He couldn't go to school, couldn't be around other kids, couldn't do much except sit inside and stare out the window at the world rolling on without him. So I brought the world to him. Aunt Meg and I had always been the cool siblings, child-free, slightly chaotic, too loud at barbecues. But when Max got sick, that didn't matter anymore. What mattered was hope. And sometimes hope looked like reclaimed lumber, a box of solar par-made fairy lights, and an over-engineered rope ladder I may or may not have borrowed from an old rock-climbing rig. Max loved it. He called it the Sky Fort. He spent hours up there with his telescope, sketchbook, and a rotating roster of stuffed animals. And for 2 whole weeks, things were good. Until I got the letter. It came on Tuesday, thick paper, HOA logo embossed like it was the freaking White House. Inside, a notice of violation for unauthorized elevated construction and a structure inconsistent with community aesthetics. Apparently, I had violated Section 8.3, subsection D of the HOA covenant, something about unapproved outbuildings or additions. But here's the thing. It was a treehouse, not a she-shed, not a guest house, not a stilted jungle gym. A literal treehouse in my own backyard, built entirely within my property line. I crumpled the letter and chucked it across the kitchen. "What's wrong?" Max asked from the table, his little bald head tilted in concern. "Nothing, buddy," I said, faking a smile. "Just grown-up nonsense." But it wasn't nothing. It was Linda Beckworth, HOA president, queen of the cul-de-sac, ruler of lawns and bringer of doom. The woman had once fined a family for putting up a holiday wreath with too many sparkles, and now she had declared war on a treehouse for a sick child. Later that day, I caught her outside, clipboard in hand, measuring the distance from the treehouse to the side fence, like she was drafting military coordinates. "Linda!" I called out, walking toward her with all the restraint I could muster. She turned slowly, face stiff. "Yes, Mr. Carson, you seriously sent a violation notice over a treehouse?" She didn't even blink. "All structures over 4 feet in height must be approved in advance. Yours is," clearly visible from the street. "So is your attitude," I muttered. "I beg your pardon?" He took a deep breath. "Look, this isn't some bachelor party tiki hut. My nephew, he's sick. He can't go anywhere. That treehouse is the only escape he's got." Her face didn't change, not a flicker of sympathy. "Rules exist for a reason. The HOA must maintain the neighborhood's visual integrity." "Visual? It's a treehouse. For a child." He put glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling and everything. Linda clicked her pen and scribbled something on her clipboard. "You have 7 days to remove the structure. After that, you will be fined $1,000 per day of non-compliance." I stared at her. "You're unbelievable, and you're in violation," she snapped. Max watched from the window. I saw his little face pressed to the glass. Confusion and fear etched across it. That night, I sat in the dark kitchen with a beer in my hand and fury in my gut. The audacity, the cruelty, the bureaucratic pettiness of it all. I had half a mind to take a sledgehammer to Linda's decorative fountain and call it aesthetic cleansing. But I didn't. Instead, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in months. Someone I never expected to involve. "Hey, man," I said when the line picked up. "Carson? You alive? I need a favor." "A big one?" "The biggest." There was a pause. "Is this about that treehouse?" My stomach dropped. "How do you know about the treehouse?" Another pause. Then a chuckle. "Because I built it." Boom, just like that, everything shifted. And if you think HOA drama gets bad with one Karen, just wait until family gets involved. The next morning, Linda Beckworth was back, with backup. This time, she wasn't just armed with her usual clipboard of doom. No, now she had two goons in tow. A sweaty middle-aged guy in a windbreaker and a much-too-eager intern with a neon safety vest. They looked like failed extras from a low-budget home inspection show. I was sipping coffee on my porch when I saw them crossing my lawn without knocking, heading straight for Max's treehouse like it owed them rent. "Excuse me," I barked, practically leaping off the porch. "You can't just trespass." Linda held up her hand like she was parting the Red Sea. "We're conducting an HOA compliance evaluation on private property." I stepped between them and the ladder. "Not without a warrant, you're not." The intern actually had the nerve to reach for the ladder. I nearly smacked his clipboard out of his hand. "Sir, this structure," he began, "is a treehouse," I snapped. "Built for a sick kid who can't go to school, can't go to parks, can't do anything but look out the damn window all day. And you want to tear it down because what, it's too whimsical?" Linda didn't flinch. "Your emotional appeals don't change the fact that you are in clear violation of HOA Code, Section 8.3, subsection D. Don't quote your little rule book at me like it's the Constitution." She bristled. "We're issuing a formal notice today. Failure to comply within 72 hours will result in a $1,000, 0 cents, daily fine and a mandatory appearance before the HOA Disciplinary Board." At that moment, the front door creaked open behind me. Max stood there in his pajamas, pale but smiling. He was holding a walkie-talkie in one hand and a crayon map in the other. "Uncle Carson," he said, "I finished the lookout log. I saw a bluebird and, I think, a raccoon." Linda looked over at him. Her expression didn't soften, not even a little. "We'll be in touch," she said coolly, turning on her heel and walking off with her two minions like she'd just mic-dropped a city ordinance. I was boiling. Max looked up at me. "Are they going to take the treehouse?" "Over my dead body," I said. "Go finish your map, Captain Treebeard." Once he was inside, I pulled out my phone and called the one person who could set this whole mess straight. "Yo," the voice answered. "You get my invoice yet?" "Yeah, thanks for that. Real generous." "Hey, labor ain't free, even for best friends. What's going on?" "You ever tell me who taught you carpentry?" There was a long pause. "You remember Linda Beckworth?" He blinked. "You're joking." "Nope, she's my sister." I just about dropped my phone. Wait, I said. "Linda Beckworth is your sister? As in, clipboard Linda? HOA Linda? The one and only. You built the treehouse that she's trying to get demolished?" "Didn't know it was her, HOA. I've been estranged for like 10 years. We don't exactly send Christmas cards." I sat down on the porch steps, stunned. "She has no idea?" "Zero," he said. "You want me to tell her?" A devious smile spread across my face. "No," I said. "Let's surprise her." 3 days later, the HOA disciplinary meeting was in full swing, and so was my plan. They held the meeting at the neighborhood rec center, which, ironically, was built like an ugly concrete shoebox and definitely violated more aesthetic standards than my treehouse. But hypocrisy has never been a deal-breaker in HOA culture. The fluorescent lights flickered, the folding chairs creaked, and At the front of the room, there she was, Linda Beckworth, queen of control, decked out in her usual beige pantsuit, like she was hosting a TED Talk on passive aggression. I sat alone at the center table. On my left, a binder with photos of Max smiling in his treehouse. On my right, a small wooden birdhouse Max had painted to look like the sky fort. Linda cleared her throat into the mic. We are here today to address the flagrant violation of Section 8.3, subsection D. I raised a hand. Before we get into that, I have a witness. Linda's eyes narrowed. This is highly irregular. The door at the back of the room opened. In walked Jake Beckworth, Linda's estranged younger brother, ex-Marine, now professional carpenter, and the man who built Max's treehouse by hand. Linda's clipboard actually slipped from her fingers. "Jake?" she whispered. Jake didn't smile. He walked straight to the front, dropped a blueprint roll on the table, and looked Linda dead in the eye. "Long time no see, sis." A gasp rolled through the room. Even the HOA treasurer leaned forward like it was a telenovela episode. Linda recovered quickly. "What are you doing here?" Jake unrolled the blueprint. "I designed and built that treehouse. It's within height regulations. It's under 120 square feet. It's bolted using tree-safe methods. It's safe, legal, and," he looked at me, "for a damn good cause." She sputtered. "This isn't about legality, it's about neighborhood standards." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you told Mom when you reported me to zoning over my garage extension?" "So, here we go," she muttered. "Oh, we've been going, Linda," he snapped. "Ever since you decided HOA bylaws were more important than your own family." The room fell into awkward silence. Someone coughed. A kid in the back whispered, "Yo, this is better than YouTube." I cleared my throat. "With all due respect to your clearly loving sibling dynamic, can we please get back to the part where you're trying to fine me $1,000, 0 cents a day, because an 8-year-old has a telescope and some fairy lights in a tree?" Linda, flustered and red in the face, tried to regroup. "Regardless of who built it, the structure has not been approved by the Architectural Review Committee." "That's funny," I interrupted, "because last night a neighbor's ring cam caught someone sneaking into that unapproved structure. Care to guess who?" Jake reached into his backpack and pulled out a printed screenshot from the footage. There, in grainy black and white, was Linda, climbing the rope ladder at midnight, holding what looked like a small box. The room exploded. "Yo, is that real? Where was she in there? Wait, is she leaving cookies?" Linda's face turned the color of expired mayonnaise. That's not what it looks like." Jake grinned. "You left Max a box of ginger snaps and a note that said, 'Don't tell anyone I was here.' Real subtle." "I just wanted to see what it was like," she cried. "You built it just like we talked about as kids." Silence. Linda's voice cracked. "We always dreamed of having a place like that. Up in the trees. Away from everything." Jake softened, just a little. "Then why try to take it away from him?" She didn't answer. Couldn't. I looked around the room. The HOA board looked uncomfortable. The audience looked ready to storm the barricades. I leaned into the mic. "You say it's about rules, but it was never about that. It was about control. About forgetting what it's like to be a kid or to have someone you love hurting and wanting just once. For them to have something magical." Linda looked down at her clipboard like it might save her. It didn't. After the meeting imploded in front of half the neighborhood and a few rogue TikTok teens, I thought Linda might retreat for a while, maybe lick her wounds in her beige lair and leave us alone. At 3:12 a.m., I woke up to a notification on my phone. My backyard camera had picked up motion near the treehouse. I blinked, groggy, and checked the feed. And there it was. Someone in a hoodie, climbing the rope ladder with surprising grace for that hour. Not just climbing, but carrying something. A long, rectangular box. I rubbed my eyes. Was that Linda again? I ran downstairs, barefoot, flung open the sliding door, and stepped into the yard just in time to see her descending. She froze like a raccoon caught in a garbage bin. Oh, for the love of... Linda? She whipped off the hood like she was revealing a Batman identity. I was checking for structural issues. In the middle of the night, with what looks like a gift box? She straightened, defensive. It's a vintage compass. For Max. He mentioned wanting to be a navigator. I stared. So now you're Santa Karen? She looked away. Don't get used to it. The next morning, Max found the compass in the sky fort, alongside a note. For your next great adventure. From someone who used to dream too. He beamed like he'd just been knighted. That should have been the twist, right? The turning point where Linda changed her ways, and the HOA backed off, and we all joined hands and sang Kumbaya under the boughs of suburban unity. Yeah, no, because the next actual twist came via a group email from the HOA vice president. Subject, immediate motion to demolish unauthorized structure. Body. Due to unresolved code violations and excessive media attention, a motion has been filed to forcibly remove the treehouse next week. I nearly bit through my coffee mug. I stormed down the street to Jake's workshop. Pisica, his detached garage, plastered with built-not-bought stickers and a rusty license plate that read, Wood God. Jake looked up from sanding something unnecessarily complicated. Belinda's caving, I said. He wiped his hands. Knew she would. Pride's a hell of a drug. She's letting the board vote to demolish the treehouse next week. He exhaled. Time to go nuclear. That evening, Jake made a few phone calls. The next day, my driveway looked like a press conference had collided with a PTA bake sale. Local news vans. A journalist from the neighborhood Gazette. Even a retired vet named Rick, who swore he once built a treehouse for a senator's kid. The real MVP, though? Mac's second-grade class. His teacher had secretly started a project. Each kid drew pictures of what the Skyfort meant to them. She turned it into a giant collage banner that read, A place where imagination lives. The HOA meeting that week was standing room only. Half the neighborhood showed up. One dude brought popcorn. Jake opened with a speech about community, family, and how the treehouse was structurally sound, spiritually wholesome, and way less of an eyesore than Gary's inflatable flamingo. I followed, holding the banner. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. Just unrolled it in front of the board and let the drawings speak for themselves. Then Max stood up, shaky, pale, but beaming. I just wanted a place where I could feel normal, he said into the mic. Where I wasn't sick, where I could see the stars. You could have heard a pin drop. Then a board member sniffled. And then Linda stood, slowly. I'd like to rescind the motion to demolish, she said. A cheer erupted. Someone actually yelled, We love you, Treehouse boy. As the crowd dispersed, Linda walked over to me. Her voice was quiet. That compass belonged to Dad, she said. Jake and I used to sneak it from his drawer and play explorers in the old oak tree behind our house. I blinked. It's kind of beautiful, she sighed. I forgot how to be a kid. Maybe this helped me remember. I didn't have anything snarky to say. That was new. 3 months later, you wouldn't have recognized our street. The same HOA that once threatened me with daily fines had now erected a giant wooden sign, carved by Jake, naturally, that read, "The Skyfort Initiative, where imagination takes root." And below that, in smaller letters, "Proudly supported by the Meadow Valley HOA Environmental and Enrichment Committee." Yeah, that's right, they gave it a committee. Linda Beckworth, once known as Clipboard Karen, Queen of Citations, now chaired a group that met weekly to brainstorm community building projects. Tree forts, fairy gardens, even a storytelling bench in the park. It was like she'd absorbed the spirit of Mr. Rogers via osmosis. But the twist that got everyone was the day she announced at the HOA quarterly meeting, "I've decided to step down as HOA president." You could hear jaws hit the floor. "I want to focus on our new enrichment efforts, and frankly, I'm tired of being the villain." She looked right at me, right at Max. I may have spent years obsessing over rules, but this neighborhood reminded me that people matter more than policies. The applause was thunderous. Even Gary clapped, and that man still hadn't deflated his flamingo. After the meeting, Linda came over holding a Tupperware of lemon squares. "For Max," she said, "and for you too, I guess." Max hugged her. She looked like someone had rebooted her entire emotional operating system. Jake walked up and nudged her. "Did you ever think we'd end up here?" he asked. "Not in a million years," she replied. I grinned. Funny how a treehouse can rebuild more than just wood and nails. Mac's treehouse had grown too, literally. We added a telescope nook, a pulley elevator, and even a rainproof reading corner. The other kids in the neighborhood took turns coming over after school. It became the spot. And every Friday, Linda brought cookies. Not just any cookies, customized ones, shaped like stars, compasses, and little wooden forts. At the neighborhood fall festival, the mayor showed up to tour the Sky Fort. Max, beaming in his pirate hat, gave her the grand tour. The banner hung overhead, faded but proud. A place where imagination lives. Linda stood beside Jake, watching the kids run through the leaves. "You think Dad would like this?" she asked quietly. Jake smiled. "He would have built a second floor." He laughed. As the sun set behind the trees, Max called out from the fort's upper deck. "Uncle Carson, Linda, come up here." I started to protest. My knees aren't 40ers anymore, but Linda had already grabbed the rope ladder. "Race you," she said, grinning. And just like that, she climbed. No clipboard, no rules. Just a woman finally remembering what it felt like to play. Sometimes, all it takes to change a Karen is a kid, a treehouse, and one forgotten compass. If you've ever had a neighbor surprise you, in good ways or bad, smash that like button, drop your wildest HOA story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Because in this suburb, the drama's never over. And trust me, next week's story involves a duck, a golf cart, and a wedding that ends in sirens. Stay tuned.